I shouldn't be here.
Why not?
God will punish me.
Lagertha and his party were jailed just after they arrived in Wessex, so they thought Heahmund was a fraud. Now, not only had they safely delivered Heahmund home, but they had also landed themselves in jeopardy. However, Lagertha did not believe that Heahmund would deceive her.
And I cannot believe the famous Lagertha has proved to be a fool for love.
The next day, Alfred summoned them. In exchange for their safety and freedom, they were required to help fight against the Vikings invading England. Bjorn wants East Anglia back first, but before he can finish speaking, Lagertha agrees to Alfred's terms. Thus began a true collaboration between the Vikings and the Saxons, a partnership that owed its existence to Heahmund's efforts. Seizing the opportunity, Heahmund sought to reclaim his bishopric. Upon discovering that his position had been filled, Heahmund flew into a rage. However, Alfred informed Heahmund that the new bishop did not get along with him, and his position was not secure enough to restore Heahmund to his bishopric, even if he wanted to. Moreover, Heahmund's association with the pagans had significantly altered his image among the people. Therefore, Heahmund needed to prove his loyalty to the king and to God before he could be reinstated as bishop. But Heahmund lacked patience. Without his title, he couldn't protect Lagertha, leading him to confront Cuthred at the Sherborne church.
Is my place. I am Sherborne's true bishop, not you. You are a hypocrite and should step aside before the Lord finds you out.
But who would easily give up such hard-won power? Cuthred knew that Heahmund was not a clean man, so he kept his men watching Heahmund's every move. Before long, Cuthred caught Heahmund and Lagertha in a secret rendezvous, not just once but multiple times. Meanwhile, when Ub revealed the land deed, they realized it was all a deception. The old king's promises regarding East Anglia were meaningless, as he had already passed the crown to Ethelwulf. But dwelling on the past was futile at this point. Alfred now had the authority to grant lands, though this would face public opposition from the council and nobles, given that these were lands once invaded and their kin killed by pagans. Therefore, they had to first prove their worth. Later, Alfred sought to persuade Ub alone, hoping he could convince everyone to convert to Christianity. This would significantly reduce the opposition when he granted them lands.
I can't imagine Bjorn would ever agree to that.
I'm not talking about Bjorn, but about you.
At a banquet, Alfred's fiancée, Elswith, made her first appearance, showing particular curiosity towards the imposing Norsemen.
Here at your court.
The sons of King Ragnar Lothbrok, the most famous of all Northmen, on our side and prepared to fight for us.
Given Alfred's busy schedule, he rarely had time to foster a romantic relationship with Elswith, but Elswith seemed indifferent to this, as the Norsemen were more than enough to keep her entertained. Bjorn also noticed Elswith's gaze, but did you think that was the end? Elswith barged into Bjorn's room at night. Despite her protests that it wasn't right, she slid under Bjorn's covers.
I'm a virgin.
Thus, Elswith gave her virginity to Bjorn, and if things go as they usually do, she might even bear Bjorn a child. Poor Alfred was cuckolded before he even got married. Who made him pull of strings and make them betray the gods? Later, Heahmund received a letter from Cuthred, essentially stating that he had evidence of Heahmund's adultery with Lagertha and intended to make it public, aiming to disgrace Heahmund. Apparently Cuthred messed with the wrong person to save his position.
You have forced me to it, Lord Cuthred. You have forced me. Or a most troublesome priest. A hollow man. Going to hell! Heahmund, this is how the world will end. No, just your world.
In the most sacred of churches, before their all-powerful god, Heahmund killed Cuthred. Although Heahmund helped Alfred directly with Cuthred, it's also true that he broke the law. So will he be punished by the council? And can Alfred provide support for Heahmund? We shall see.
By your blood, I will bear you a child, a son, and he too will be a god, like you.
After seizing Kattegat, Ivar once again encountered Freydis, Ever since Fritis had offered herself to him, Ivar had been unable to forget her. She was one of the few people who could make Ivar show a gentler side. Fritis continued to worship Ivar as a hero, just as before, proclaiming that he was chosen by the gods. This completely disarmed Ivar, leading him to share many of his innermost thoughts with her. It was clear that Ivar had decided on this woman, and it wasn't long before Fritis was crowned queen. From a slave to a queen, a crow turned phoenix, a dream Margreta had always harbored. Now, she was not only betrayed by Ub but also abandoned on the farm. Fortunately, Hvitserk, with his deep sense of loyalty, took in the disgraced Margreta. Yet, she remained her usual self, spreading rumors that Ivar was impotent and even inciting Hvitserk to kill Ivar and claim the throne for himself. When Fritis became intimate with Ivar, she too discovered his issue. However, her approach was far more sophisticated than Margreta's had ever been.
You know I can't.
Ivar, listen to me. To me, you are a god, and I will have your child. By your blood, I will bear you a child, a son, and he too will be a god, like you.
What Fritis means is that Ivar is a god, so she can conceive Ivar's child in another way, by drinking Ivar's blood. But it wasn't long before Fritis found another man and engaged in a passionate encounter in the stable. Clearly, Freydis's previous assurances were just to appease Ivar, and to deceive him. She had to become pregnant. Soon, Fritis told Ivar she was pregnant. Although skeptical, Ivar was moved to tears of joy.
What?
With your child, Ivar.
Perhaps due to the stress of recent events, Ivar began to blur the lines between reality and dreams, envisioning Margreta disguised as the queen, stabbing him in the heart with a dagger. Since his mother had a knack for foreseeing the future through dreams, this recurring nightmare greatly unsettled Ivar. He asked Hvitserk what should be done about Margreta. Of course, Hvitserk would not harm Margreta and told Ivar to stay out of it, but Ivar would not heed this advice. One night, 3 assassins crept into Margreta's cabin. Margreta was struck in the back by a thrown knife just as she attempted to flee, realizing too late that her madness had brought her doom.
I love Ivar. It's not worth killing me. I'm harmless. I'm mad about regret.
Such ruthless actions by Ivar drove a deeper wedge between him and Hvitserk. Before long, the idle Harold decided to return to England, as battle was their creed. Since Ivar had left a large garrison in York, that was Harold's first stop. Throughout, Hvitserk wore a gloomy expression, finally exploding in anger when Ivar questioned him.
That's your little brother, and you know exactly what's wrong with me. Margareta's dead.
I know.
Of course you know! You ordered the killing!
Why would I do that?
Because she knew that you could never get the woman pregnant.
Ivar seized this moment to dispel the rumors of his infertility, announcing to everyone that the queen was pregnant. Ivar couldn't understand why Hvitserk cared so much for a madwoman when there were so many beautiful women in Kattegat. But Hvitserk genuinely loved Margreta. It must be said, Hvitserk's affection was unmatched by any of his brothers. He used this as an opportunity to vent all his frustrations towards Ivar. From Sigurd's death to Ub's departure and the subsequent civil wars, Ivar had finally alienated the last of his brothers. Perhaps Fritis was the only light left in Ivar's heart. But Fritis was not only more cunning than any previous queen, she also had very sophisticated methods. She found that man again, and he never expected the gentle beauty to turn into a cold noose. After days of travel, Floki and his group finally arrived in Iceland, but when they disembarked, they realized that it was not what Floki had described, and that the endless barren land around them was not even comparable to Kattegat. 2 families had followed Floki on this journey, the Eyvind family and the Kjetil family. Eyvind was the first to question Floki, pointing out the impossibility of cultivation in a land of nothing but rocks. He felt deceived by Floki. Kjetil, however, trusted in Floki's character, arguing that complaints wouldn't solve their problems. Days later, without sighting the promised fertile lands, they discovered a large area of hot springs. Floki decided they would settle there. Iceland, known for its extensive landscape of 103,000 square kilometers, is a true island of ice and fire, with vast glaciers, dozens of active volcanoes, and hundreds of dormant ones. the aftermath of volcanic eruptions leaves barren land, with only about 3% of the terrain suitable for cultivation. Perhaps the area Floki had seen before was part of that 3%. Now, returning, their failure to find it was understandable. Ivan's son and Kjetil's daughter, who were a couple, planted the first seed of love in this new world within the hot springs. Up until then, everyone lived in peace. One day Floki wanted to build a temple to Thor. The Ivan family objected, arguing there were not enough resources and energy to construct a temple when their houses were still unfinished. Kjetil agreed with Floki, only to be accused by Ivan of pandering. Ivan lamented that they had been lured away from their queen and homeland for Floki's fantasy of kingship, only to end up in misery. He insisted that their priority should be to secure enough food to survive the winter, expressing negativity throughout the conversation. Despite this, the temple construction proceeded. Though Ivan's family neither contributed resources nor helped, this led to verbal altercations between the younger members of the two families.
You don't sound like a bull. You sound like a dog. So that's what I'm going to call you. Bull the dog!
Eventually, the parents from both sides also became openly hostile. Vikings are known for resolving disputes through combat, but Kjetil's daughter Aud intervened in time to prevent bloodshed. Soon, the temple was completed. More of a simple altar than a temple, really. They conducted a sacrifice ceremony, praying to Thor for safety and a bountiful harvest. However, the Ivan family, who had contributed nothing to the labor, showed up for the blessings. Bull even stole the sacrificial offerings for his own family's use.
This is sacred. Thor is here. Give it. Have it.
Such sacrilegious behavior finally angered Floki, who grabbed his axe, ready to strike, but Aud once again stopped him in time. Since Helga's death, Floki's desire for violence had lessened. In the past, he surely would have slain anyone disrespecting the gods. However, Floki's actions earned Ivan's resentment. In retaliation, they set fire to the newly built temple. The statue of Thor was also destroyed in the blaze. In Viking belief, the destruction of a god's statue foretold disaster. The moment Floki saw the temple collapse, he was utterly devastated. Kjetil's son Thorgrim accused Bull of arson, leading to another confrontation. In the scuffle, Bull drew a knife on Thorgrim, who in turn killed Bull in self-defense. This was the first bloodshed in Iceland. Unfortunately, this was just the beginning. Their venture in Iceland soon turned into a massive disaster, with Thor's wrath descending upon them all. In the end, Floki's mind was filled with nothing but endless regret.